The soft blue glow of the medical bay's lights cast gentle shadows across Lyra's violet skin as she lay motionless on the examination table. Her antennae twitched occasionally, the only sign that the young Celestian was conscious. The human doctor, Dr. Marcus Thompson, studied the readings on his holographic display with growing concern. "Your cellular structure is unlike anything I've seen in your species before," he muttered, more to himself than to his patient. "The radiation exposure from that solar flare should have been fatal." Lyra turned her head slightly, her large iridescent eyes reflecting the ambient light. "Perhaps it would have been better if it was," she whispered. Dr. Thompson's weathered face softened. At 62, he treated countless alien species aboard the International Space Station Hospital, but something about this young girl's resignation struck a chord deep within him. "Now, that's no way for a fighter to talk." "I'm not a fighter," Lyra responded, her translator converting her musical language into crisp English. "I'm an exile. My family abandoned me when my genetic mutations first appeared. They said I was an aberration, a threat to the purity of our bloodline." Her voice carried no bitterness, only a deep, worn acceptance. The doctor's hand stilled over his console. In his 30 years of space medicine, he'd seen too many cases of alien societies rejecting their own over genetic differences. The universe, it seemed, had a universal constant, fear of the unknown. "Well," he said, pulling up a chair beside her bed. "Speaking as someone who's studied your readings extensively over the past week, those mutations of yours? They're fascinating. Your body is adapting to space radiation in ways I've never seen before. You're not an aberration, Lyra. You're evolving." For the first time since her arrival, a flicker of interest crossed her features. "Evolving? But our species completed its evolutionary cycle millennia ago. That's what the elders always taught." Dr. Thompson chuckled. "If there's one thing humans have learned in our relatively short time among the stars, it's that evolution never truly stops. Life finds a way to adapt, to survive, to thrive in new conditions. Your mutations aren't a flaw, they're your body's way of preparing for a future your elders haven't imagined yet." Lyra's antennae perked up slightly, a sign of increased attention in her species. "But without a family unit, a Celestian cannot." "Who says you don't have a family unit?" Dr. Thompson interrupted gently. "Family isn't just about genetic matching or cultural traditions. Sometimes family is who you choose, who chooses you back." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "My wife and I, we never had children of our own. But our home on Earth has always been open to those who needed it. If you're interested in continuing your treatment, we have a spare room with a view of the Pacific Ocean." The young alien's eyes widened, her translator struggling to keep up with the rapid clicking sounds she made in surprise. But I'm not human. Your society has been enriched by every new species we've welcomed," he finished. "Besides, my wife Janet is a xenobiologist. She'd be thrilled to help document your adaptations. Think of it as a cultural exchange, if that makes it easier." For several long moments, Lyra lay silent, her gaze fixed on the celestial view through the medical bay's window. Finally, her antennae swayed in what Dr. Thompson had learned was an expression of cautious hope. I would like to learn about human families," she said softly. "And perhaps discover what it means to belong somewhere again." Dr. Thompson smiled, already mentally composing the message he'd send to Janet. "Then let's get started on your discharge paperwork. Welcome to the Thompson family, Lyra." As he walked away to fetch the necessary documents, he heard a sound he never heard from a Celestian before, something between a chirp and a laugh. Sometimes, he thought, the universe had a way of bringing the right people together, regardless of which star system they called home. The descent through Earth's atmosphere was nothing like Lyra had expected. Unlike the sleek, silent glides of Celestian ships, the human shuttle rattled and roared, making her antennae vibrate with each layer of atmosphere they pierced. Dr. Thompson, noticing her discomfort, reached across the aisle to pat her hand reassuringly. "First time in a classic Earth vessel?" he asked, his eyes crinkling with understanding. "We're still a bit old school with our atmospheric entries." But trust me, these ships have carried millions safely home. Home. The word echoed strangely in Lyra's mind as her translator processed it. On Celestia, the concept of home was intrinsically linked to genetic purity and familial hierarchies. Yet here she was, entering the atmosphere of an alien world, with a member of an entirely different species calling it her home. The landing was smoother than the descent, and soon Lyra found herself standing in the San Francisco International Spaceport, her few possessions clutched in a standard-issue space station bag. The gravity was slightly stronger than she was used to, making her movements more deliberate, more careful. "Janet's waiting outside," Dr. Thompson said, guiding her through the crowded terminal. Lyra noticed how other humans stared at her violet skin and swaying antennae, but unlike the condemning looks she'd received on Celestia, these gazes held curiosity, and sometimes even friendly interest. A woman with silver-streaked hair and laugh lines around her eyes stood near the exit, holding a digital tablet. The moment she spotted them, her face lit up with such genuine warmth that Lyra's antennae tingled with unexpected emotion. "Welcome to Earth, Lyra!" Janet Thompson rushed forward, stopping just short of embracing her. "Marcus told me about your sensitivity to sudden contact. I've been reading everything I could find about Celestian physiology. I hope you don't mind being my research subject, in a purely informal way, of course." Lyra's translator took a moment to process the rapid flow of words, but the underlying enthusiasm needed no translation. "I thank you," she managed. "Your interest in my condition is most unexpected. On my world, people preferred to look away." Janet's expression softened. "Well, on this world, we look straight at what makes us different and celebrate it. Come on, let's get you home. I've set up your room with variable gravity controls and spectrum-adjustable lighting. Marcus mentioned your species prefers a slightly purple-shifted light spectrum?" As they walked to the transport pod, Lyra observed the easy way the Thompsons moved together, how they anticipated each other's movements, how their words overlapped and complemented each other. It was so different from the rigid, hierarchical interactions of Celestian family units. The transport pod ride to their home was filled with Janet's excited explanations about Earth culture and questions about Celestian biology. "Dr. Thompson, call me Marcus at home," he'd insisted, occasionally interjected with gentle reminders to let Lyra process everything at her own pace. When they arrived at their coastal home, Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The house stood on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean, its windows capturing the setting sun's reflection on the water. The sight reminded her of the luminescent seas of her homeworld, but instead of bringing pain, the memory now felt like a bridge between her past and possible future. "The ocean helps with the gravity adjustment," Janet explained as they entered. "Something about the negative ions in the sea breeze. At least, that's what our last Jovian guest claimed." "You've had other guests?" Lyra asked, her antennae perking with interest. Marcus smiled, setting down her bag. "We believe in an open-door policy. The universe is too vast and wonderful for anyone to face it alone. Now, would you like to see a room? Janet's been working on it all week." As Lyra followed them up the stairs, she felt something she hadn't experienced since her mutations first appeared: hope. Perhaps here, on this water-rich world with its rattling spaceships and curious inhabitants, she could learn what it meant to be part of a family that chose her, mutations and all. 2 weeks into her stay on Earth, Lyra made her first discovery about human families. They didn't follow rulebooks. On Celestia, every interaction was governed by ancient protocols, but the Thompsons seemed to operate on something far more unpredictable: emotion. "Pancakes," Janet announced one morning, setting a plate of flat, circular food items in front of Lyra. "Marcus mentioned your system can process Earth carbohydrates, and I thought you might like to try a Thompson family tradition." Lyra's antennae wavered uncertainly over the strange food. Her scanner indicated it was safe for consumption, but that wasn't what made her hesitate. "You made these for me? Without any formal nutritional request?" Janet laughed, the sound as warm as the morning sunlight streaming through the kitchen windows. "Honey, in this house, we feed people because we want to, not because they file paperwork. Now try them with this, we call it maple syrup." The sweetness that flooded Lyra's taste receptors was unlike anything in her experience. Her antennae stretched straight up in surprise, causing both Thompsons to chuckle. "This is pleasant," she managed, making Janet beam with pride. "Speaking of pleasant surprises," Marcus said, looking up from his morning news tablet, "I've enrolled you in the local xenobiology research program. Not as a subject," he added quickly, seeing her antennae droop, "as a participant researcher. Your mutations give you a unique perspective on adaptive evolution." Lyra set down her fork carefully. "But I'm not qualified. On Celestia, my condition made me ineligible for advanced studies." "Earth isn't Celestia," Janet said firmly. "Here, your differences are exactly what make you valuable to the scientific community. Besides," she added with a wink, "I may have pulled some strings at the university where I lecture." Later that day, as Lyra stood in her room preparing for her first visit to the research facility, she noticed something had changed. The walls, previously bare, now held several framed images, photographs, she realized, of the Thompsons with various alien species. In each one, they were smiling, their arms around beings from across the galaxy. "Those are our family photos," Marcus said from the doorway, making her jump slightly. "Every person who's stayed with us has become part of our family in some way. See that Andromeda being there? They're now heading their planet's diplomatic corps. And the Proximan twins? They just opened the first cross-species medical center in their system." Lyra's fingers traced the frames gently. "But they left. Isn't family supposed to be permanent?" Marcus stepped into the room, his expression thoughtful. "Family isn't about permanence, Lyra. It's about growth. Everyone in these photos left changed, and so did we. That's what family does. It helps you become who you're meant to be, even if that means watching you fly away someday." "And what am I meant to be?" Lyra asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's the exciting part," he replied, handing her a research tablet with her name already programmed in. "You get to figure that out yourself. But you don't have to do it alone anymore." As they headed to the transport pod for her first day at the research facility, Lyra felt something shifting inside her. Her mutations, long a source of shame, tingled with new possibility. The radiation adaptation that had made her an outcast on Celestia might help her understand something fundamental about evolution itself. "Ready to make history?" Janet asked, joining them with an extra research kit. "First Celestian evolutionary biologist. Has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" Lyra's antennae swayed gently in the morning breeze. "On my world, we believe history can only be made by following ancient paths," she said slowly. "But perhaps it's time for a new path." The Thompsons exchanged proud glances as they boarded the pod. Neither mentioned how Lyra's violet skin had taken on a slightly iridescent quality in the sunlight, a beautiful and unexpected adaptation that seemed to reflect her growing confidence. Sometimes they were learning, family meant simply being present while someone discovered their own light. The Earth Science Institute's xenobiology department hummed with activity as Lyra followed Dr. Andrea Reed, the lead researcher, through its winding corridors. Her antennae twitched at the cacophony of sounds, human voices, alien communications, and the steady beep of various instruments. "Your mutation is extraordinary," Dr. Reed said, studying the holographic display of Lyra's cellular structure. "The way your body processes radiation, it could revolutionize our understanding of adaptive evolution. We've never seen anything like it." Those words, once a source of pain on Celestia, now filled Lyra with an unfamiliar warmth. Here, her difference wasn't just accepted, it was celebrated. "We'd like to run some tests," Dr. Reed continued. "With your permission, of course. The results could help us develop better radiation protection for deep space travel." Before Lyra could respond, a familiar voice crackled over the facility's communication system. "Emergency alert. Incoming solar flare detected. All sensitive equipment must be secured. Radiation-vulnerable species, please proceed to shielded areas immediately." The laboratory erupted into controlled chaos as researchers rushed to protect their experiments. Dr. Reed turned to Lyra with concern. "You should head to the shelter. No, Lyra said firmly, her antennae straightening with determination. My mutations, they allow me to withstand radiation. I can help secure the sensitive materials. For the next hour, Lyra worked alongside the human researchers, her naturally radiation-resistant body allowing her to handle tasks others couldn't. Her antennae guided her to equipment emitting dangerous levels of radiation, and her quick actions saved several crucial experiments. When the solar flare passed, Dr. Reed approached her with newfound respect. That was remarkable, Lyra. You didn't just survive the radiation, you thrived in it. Your readings during the event were off the charts. Later that evening, as Janet drove them home in the transport pod, Lyra noticed something different about her reflection in the window. Her violet skin now shimmered with subtle patterns, like starlight dancing on water. It's beautiful, Janet said, glancing at her. Your body isn't just resistant to radiation, it's learning to use it. Transform it into something new. Lyra touched her shimmering skin gently. On Celestia, transformation was considered a flaw. We were taught that perfection means remaining unchanged. Well, Janet replied with a smile, Earth's greatest achievements came from those who dared to change. Speaking of which... She paused, seeming uncertain for the first time since Lyra had met her. Marcus and I were talking. We'd like to officially register as your Earth Guardians. It's completely your choice, but... What does that mean? Lyra interrupted, her antennae quivering. It means we'd be legally recognized as your family here on Earth. You'd have full rights as our ward, access to education, healthcare, everything. But more than that. Janet's voice softened. It means we choose you, Lyra. Mutations, transformations, and all. Lyra's vision blurred with moisture, another new adaptation her body had developed, mirroring the human expression of emotion. But what if I keep changing? What if I become something even more different? Then we'll change with you, Janet said simply. That's what families do. When they arrived home, Marcus was waiting with dinner and a stack of official-looking documents. But what caught Lyra's attention was a new addition to the wall of family photos, an empty frame, waiting to be filled. Thought we might take our first official family picture this weekend, he said casually. If you're interested. Lyra looked at the empty frame, then at the Thompsons, these humans who had redefined everything she thought she knew about family and belonging. Her skin shimmered brighter, responding to the emotions she couldn't yet name. I would like that, she said softly. I would like that very much. As they sat down to dinner, Lyra realized that perhaps her mutations weren't just about surviving radiation. Perhaps they were preparing her for something far more remarkable, the ability to accept love, unconditionally and without reservation, in all its transformative power. The morning of Lyra's guardianship ceremony was interrupted by an unexpected signal from her personal communicator, one she hadn't heard in months. Her antennae went rigid as the familiar chime of a Celestian High Council transmission filled her room. Specimen L-177. The cold voice of Elder Voss crackled through the device. Your genetic anomaly has drawn considerable attention from the scientific community. The Council demands your immediate return for further study. Lyra's shimmering skin dulled to a flat purple as fear crept through her body. The Thompsons were downstairs, preparing for what should have been a day of celebration. Now. Your silence is noted, L-177. Elder Voss continued. A retrieval vessel has already been dispatched. The Council reminds you that resistance to authority is a violation of... Lyra cut the transmission, her hands shaking. Within moments, Marcus and Janet burst into her room, their faces etched with concern. We heard the transmission, Marcus said, his voice tight with protective anger. Earth has treaties with Celestia. They can't just demand your return. Janet was already on her communication device, contacting the Earth Science Institute. Dr. Reed needs to know about this. Your research there has diplomatic protection status. But Lyra barely heard them. Her mind was racing through memories of the cold laboratories on Celestia, the endless tests, the looks of disgust from her own people. Perhaps I should go, she whispered. I don't want to cause trouble for Earth's relations with Celestia. Absolutely not, Janet said firmly, crossing the room to stand before her. You're not a specimen, Lyra. You're our daughter, or you will be in about 3 hours if you still want to be. Marcus joined them, holding up his tablet. The Institute's lawyers are already preparing a response. Your work there has been groundbreaking. Dr. Reed says your insights into radiation adaptation could save thousands of lives across multiple species. Lyra's antennae swayed uncertainly. But what if they're right? What if my place is in a laboratory, being studied? Your place, Janet said softly, is wherever you choose it to be. That's what we've been trying to teach you about family. It's not about obligation or authority, it's about choice. And we choose you. The question is, what do you choose? Before Lyra could respond, her communicator chimed again. This time, it was Dr. Reed's face that appeared in the holographic display. Lyra, I've just been contacted by the Interstellar Scientific Ethics Committee, she said, her expression bright with excitement. They're fascinated by your case, not just your mutations, but the implications for self-determination in scientific research. They want you to present your findings at the upcoming Galactic Conference. Present my findings? Lyra's voice quivered. But I'm just a subject. You're a researcher, Dr. Reed corrected. One who happens to have unique insights into her own condition. The committee believes your work could establish new protocols for ethical research across all species. More importantly, she added with a knowing smile, they've granted you diplomatic immunity until after the conference. The Celestian High Council can't touch you. Lyra's skin began to shimmer again, stronger than ever before. She looked at Marcus and Janet, her chosen family, and felt something shift inside her. The fear wasn't gone, but it was different now. It had transformed, just as she had. I want to stay, she said firmly. Not because I'm afraid of returning, but because this is where I belong. Where I can help others understand that being different isn't wrong, it's an opportunity to evolve, to grow, to become something new. Janet wiped tears from her eyes as Marcus squeezed her shoulder gently. Then let's get ready for that ceremony, he said. We have some guardianship papers to sign before you start changing the galaxy's understanding of evolution. As they headed downstairs together, Lyra's skin rippled with patterns that seemed to mirror the ocean outside. Constant motion, endless adaptation, but always moving forward. She wasn't running from her past anymore. She was walking toward her future, with a family who saw her differences not as flaws, but as gifts to be celebrated. 3 months after the guardianship ceremony, Lyra stood before the assembled delegates of the Galactic Conference, her shimmering skin casting dancing lights across the grand auditorium. The Thompsons sat in the front row, their proud smiles giving her strength. Distinguished delegates, she began, her voice clear and confident. I stand before you not just as a researcher, but as living proof that what we often fear as abnormal may be the key to our evolution. My mutations, once seen as a threat to Celestian purity, have opened new pathways in radiation adaptation research. Her presentation screen displayed the breakthrough findings from her work at the Earth Science Institute. Charts and diagrams showed how her unique cellular structure could be used to develop better radiation protection for space travelers. But more importantly, they showed something else: hope for others like her across the galaxy. But the true breakthrough, she continued, her antennae gently swaying, isn't just in the science. It's an understanding that progress doesn't come from rejecting our differences, but from embracing them. My human family taught me that. In the audience, she could see the Celestian delegates shifting uncomfortably. Elder Voss's face was particularly rigid, but beside him sat younger council members who appeared genuinely intrigued. Today, I propose a new initiative, Lyra announced, her skin brightening with purpose. The Interspecies Adaptation Research Program. A collaborative effort between Earth Science Institute and willing participants from all species who exhibit unique genetic adaptations. Not as specimens to be studied, but as partners in understanding our own evolution. The conference hall erupted in discussion. Dr. Reed, sitting beside the Thompsons, was already typing furiously on her tablet, no doubt planning the program's implementation. But Lyra wasn't finished. "And to my own people," she said, looking directly at the Celestian delegation, "I extend a special invitation. Let us transform our fear of change into curiosity about possibility. Let us learn from humanity's greatest strength, their ability to make family not from perfect sameness, but from beautiful difference." After her speech, as delegates crowded around to discuss collaboration possibilities, a young Celestian representative approached her. "The Council was wrong about you," she said quietly. "Your mutations weren't a deviation from our path. They were showing us a new one." Later that evening, the Thompsons hosted a celebration at their coastal home. The house was filled with an impossible mix of species: humans, aliens, and even a few Celestian scientists who had broken ranks to join Lyra's initiative. "To family," Marcus proposed a toast, looking around at the gathered crowd. "In all its wonderful, unexpected forms." Lyra stood by the window, watching the sunset paint the ocean in colors that matched her shimmering skin. Janet joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Proud of you, sweetheart," she said softly. "Though I have to admit, when we first offered you that spare room, I didn't expect we'd end up helping revolutionize interstellar science." Lyra's antennae curved in amusement. "And I never expected that being exiled would lead me to find my true home." She paused, watching the diverse group of beings chatting and laughing together in the living room. "Do you think we can really change how the galaxy sees difference?" "Honey," Janet smiled, "you've already started. Look around, Celestians and humans sharing research notes, species from across the galaxy planning collaborative studies. All because one brave girl decided to see her flaw as a gift." As if to emphasize her words, Lyra's skin began to glow with new patterns, more complex and beautiful than ever before. But now she understood. It wasn't just her body adapting to radiation. It was her heart, expanding to embrace all the possibilities that lay ahead. Through the window, the first stars of evening were becoming visible. Somewhere out there, on countless worlds, others like her were waiting to learn that their differences didn't make them outcasts. They made them pioneers. "Ready to change the universe?" Marcus asked, joining them with fresh drinks. Lyra looked at her human parents, her chosen family who had taught her the true meaning of belonging. "With this family behind me?" she replied, her skin glowing with joy and purpose. "I'm ready for anything." Above them, the stars twinkled like promises of adventures yet to come, as the ocean waves below whispered ancient songs of adaptation, evolution, and the endless forms that love could take.